I'd now like to introduce Roger Smith, who's going to talk an overview of the biosecurity system, but looking at it from a positive point of view in terms of the opportunities to make a difference. Thanks, Roger.
And no, I'm not going to talk about an overview of the biosecurity system. Barry just did that for me. And I thought that'd be damn boring, because if you're at this conference, you should understand how the New Zealand biosecurity system works. So I'll give you an extensive overview just in case you missed it. We have a pre-border, a border, and a post-border. That's the biosecurity system. Thank you. Now let's move on to something that I think is more relevant and more important for today. First thing is, how do I make slides move?
Barry's got it. Yeah.
What's that here? Okay, so let's have a reality check. And funny enough, you're going to find a lot of what I say today seems to support Barry's speech, and if the survey goes back up again, I'd say C. But anyway, let's move on to that. So the reality is of the border today, people say how well it's enforced, and we're lucky we have a moat around us. But if you look at the figures, 500,000 passengers in a month, nearly 70,000 sea containers in a month, 250 vessels plus in a month, and I don't know where they got their figure, but a lot of mail parcels. I think 900,000 actually parcels a month. Now, currently our biosecurity system is very well developed with R&D. It relies on people, dogs, X-rays, and an increasing number of our data analysts working in the background doing data crunching to identify high-profile risk. And of course, our diagnostic teams and our inclusion teams working in the background, and our people developing the import standards. That's about where we sit right now. So we're doing okay at the moment in biosecurity, but it is the same system that when Barry was there, and it's been the same system forever. It's the system they run around the world. You have a border, you use it. Now that's all very good and well. My problem is that when I start looking ahead to 2025, I start to now have 800 to 1 million passengers a month, around 100,000 containers a month. Now, tourism and trade is going to keep moving, and so these figures might be high, low, but the best predictions we can get. The fact is, I can't keep resourcing with people, dogs, and X-rays to address that growth rate. And also, we do not want to be the constrictor for trade and tourism. We want to support that trade and travel, but we can't keep doing it with just adding more people into limited airport space and port space. We need to think about different ways of running our business. So even if I was allowed to go and get another 500 biosecurity staff, I have trouble finding them, I have trouble placing them, and then industry will have trouble paying for them. So we need to look at other options, and that's why I'm pleased to be here today at this conference. So, as Barry mentioned, we have a new problem. Now, often we look at, and MPI has looked at, the problems with incursion through an economic lens. And that's been driven, of course, we have GIA partners, we have an economic responsibility within our ministry's portfolio. But right now, right today, and my apologies for being late, but as I say, Russ never sleeps, that's where I was. And having just come back, these current incursions are having a much bigger impact and cost than just economic. The one we have today with myrtle rust eats at the very core of who we are as a country and at our very identity. And so we have to start looking through a different lens. Now, so right now you'll see there's two things on that picture. We have our myrtle rust, and now we have our carry dieback also suffering from PTA. Now, doing more of the same, as I said, is not going to help us. We can't keep doing more of the same. So, last November, as Barry mentioned, it's a multiple slide, as Barry mentioned, we launched Biosecurity 2025. Now, part of that Biosecurity 2025 has a strategic direction too, which is developing a toolbox for tomorrow. Sounded great in November 2025, a toolbox for tomorrow. My problem is I need a toolbox now. I need it today, and we as a country need it this week or next week as we move into a myrtle rust incursion. So the sciences we know are moving quickly. Technology and research are moving quickly, and many of them show great promise in becoming a tool for us to fight some of the incursions. And one, just as one example, is gene editing that I have up on the screen. But the problem is, we need to encourage the wider community. We need to, as Barry just called them nicely, the silent majority. We need to initiate what I call an adult debate on science and facts and possibilities and potential and answers and solutions that are more than more people at the border, more dogs at the border, more X-ray machines at the border. Even if we're using new terahertz X-ray machines, which might be fast improvement, they are still only a minor solution. We are going to have incursions, and if we move to 1 million passengers a month, we will continue to have incursions. I can't apologise, I can't promise, I can't say that won't happen. That is a fact of life. We will have incursions from air blowing, we'll have incursions from passengers, we'll have incursions from cargo. We need to focus on the tools post-border. We need to focus on the science to help us address these issues. It's a reality. So for me, we've had a call to arms in the last 2 or 3 days. Myrtle rust is something that will unite. It may fragment us to start with, but I believe will eventually unite us as a country to fight an incursion, and it needs the science community to be leading in that space. So for me, this conference is at a perfect timing because it brings the right people in the room to have the right conversations. There's another stream going in the next room with iwi and others talking about how we engage broader, and I've just been at one of those sessions. And so now is the time for us to work together to develop new tools and push the science debate. So for me, let us not lose sight of what's at risk. Let us not shy away from that debate. Let us show that over these 3 days we're ambitious, not crazy, or maybe we're just crazily ambitious. But I want us to think hard about how we can address these concerns. Unfortunately, myrtle rust is here. We now have 2 confirmed sites. One's 7 kilometres apart. I'm not saying that means we can't eradicate, but I'm a realist that says as an airborne fungus, we have a serious challenge on our hands. So out of bad, sometimes good comes. Today is the day that we should be taking that challenge and going, how can the science community help us protect what we have left? How do we protect Taonga, our special species around the country? How do we protect our economic issues that will challenge us with Manuka? And have that discussion, and if at the end of these 3 days, we have a collective spirit and the ability to go and have a conversation, the ability to talk out loud in public that gene editing may not be such a bad thing, that it might be a solution for certain issues, that at least we can have that adult conversation and not be talked down by the vocal minority while the silent majority let things happen around them. So please, let's take the opportunity we have today, tomorrow and on Thursday, Wednesday, and have the conversation. That's all I have to say for you. I issue a challenge. I'm happy to take any questions if you have any. Thank you. Thank you. Sounds fast.
Thank you, Roger. And we have got a couple of minutes if there was a question for Roger.
And just to confirm, the right answer was C. not to influence that.
Okay. Thank you, Roger.
Thank you, Jen.
How will you process 1 million passengers a month if we don't? You won't be able to. It'll just stop. The border will just chog up.
Yeah. So, I mean, physically at Auckland Airport, obviously very expensive real estate, it's physically impossible to get that number through at any time. I mean, we can process passengers as long as you're happy to wait 30 minutes or an hour or whatever. I'm just being realistic. So we're looking at, obviously, in the Spencer R&D space, and R&I, we're looking at new technologies, be it terahertz cameras, and different ways of processing and data analytics to try and identify lower risk passengers. But the role of biosecurity at the border, as you know, Barry, and everyone, it's not the same as I used to be in customs, whereas in customs we can run algorithms and try and identify people who are purposely trying to avoid the system. In our space, it's containers with hitchhikers, it's passengers with forgetful memories, it's children who have a sandwich in their packet. There is no data analytics that will narrow that down to the individual who got sleepy on the plane and forgot that apple that they picked up from Mum's place in Queensland before they came. So we have to have better tools. And to do those tools, you can't look at MPI to develop those tools. We can look at the international community. We can look at the community in this room to think about how we do it. But also importantly for me is that we have to have the understanding that incursions will happen and continue to happen. And that's when we have to have the toolbox ready to go. So right now, as I said, we have a challenge. What are we doing? How can we go and fix trees that we know are at risk? How can we prevent them being infected, especially for particular iconic trees? If you take an 800-year-old Pahutakawa that's very special to our people, how do we protect that tree right now? What does the science allow us to do? There's a couple of questions. Is there a microphone or? Yep, it's coming. I can't see that far.
Hey, excellent call to arms. One of the issues is, of course, to develop these toolboxes, and particularly things like CRISPR-Cas, ways of identifying resistant stock of Pahutakawa, et cetera, that takes a lot of time and it takes a lot of money, and we're going to need genomes of these things, which takes effort. And you say we need them now. So how do we convince people to fund that kind of work? It's not clear how you would fund sequencing the Pahutakawa genome, which needs to be done now in the face of myrtle rust. It's not clear how we would have information for genotyping Pahutakawa. How do we do that? Okay,
so I can't give you a magic answer, but let me say I think that the answer now is easier than it was 5 days ago. You need to focus the mind. As Barry said, 4 years. We've been working on this for 7 years, since 2010, on the challenge. We knew myrtle rust was coming 7 years ago. Unfortunately, we had 2 cyclones recently, Debbie and Cook. Seem to be, from NIWA's latest advice to me today, is that they look like the guilty culprits. They provided the perfect wind conditions and moisture content. But you're right. So what we have now is, that's what I mean, we have ministers, we have MPI, we have the general community, and soon I'm sure we'll have the entire population of 4.7 million people in New Zealand looking to us to say, how are we going to save our Christmas tree? How are we going to save some of our industries? How are we going to save our Bartlett Rata? So I think we have the opportunity now to have that discussion and to work as a community to say, this is what we need to do. How to do seed banking, how to do genome, etc., etc. So it is hard when it's not in your face. Priorities drop up and down, and it's suddenly this and that. I think right now, and I don't like to say to always make the best out of a disaster, but right now we do have a lot of people's interest across the country focused on this. So I think, but we have to come up with a plan, and we have to have the community, through your correct groups, come to us and say, here's what we might be able to do, and here's how we might do it, and here's what it might look like. So, and we want to work across communities and decide, what do we need to do? But we have to go proactive and front foot, and we have to do it now.
Thank you. I think we're going to finish.
Okay. Thank you, Jen.
Thank you. There are another couple of questions, but I'd like to get through our speakers and come back to them if I may. Bill, sorry for that. Thank you very much, Roger.